The neural feedback from Kythera's symbiotic combat suit screamed warnings as plasma bolts seared past her crystalline exoskeleton. Around her, the arena's crimson sands drank deep of alien blood as the Valkorian Empire's finest warriors demonstrated their superiority over yet another conquered species. "Another disappointing batch," growled Commander Nexthal, his four arms manipulating holographic displays with practiced efficiency. The towering reptilian scales shifted from deep purple to contemptuous orange as he watched the slaughter below. These mammals barely lasted 3 cycles. Where's the sport in crushing vermin? The arena erupted in thunderous approval as Kythera's energy blade cleaved through her opponent's chitinous armor. The insectoid warrior from the Helix Collective crumpled, joining 17 of its brethren in death. The crowd of thousands, representing dozens of species within the Valkorian fold, roared their bloodlust. High above in the Imperial observation deck, Emperor Vaktholon's ancient eyes surveyed the carnage with boredom. His species had ruled this quadrant for 8 millennia, conquering and absorbing lesser civilizations with methodical precision. Combat was their art, war their religion, and domination their birthright. "Majesty," wheezed Advisor Muldranith, his gaseous form rippling with nervous energy, "the scouts report another species has been located in the outer spiral. They call themselves humans." Vaktholon's interest flickered momentarily. "Bipedal mammals, I assume? Standard carbon-based physiology?" "Indeed, Majesty. Preliminary observations suggest they engage in primitive warfare among themselves. Stone-throwing. Savages, by all accounts. Their military technology appears to be combustion-based projectiles and basic chemical explosives." A laugh rumbled through the Emperor's chest, a sound like grinding tectonic plates. "How refreshingly primitive. It's been centuries since we've encountered such backward creatures. They'll provide adequate entertainment for the Grand Centennial Games." Below in the arena, Kythera raised her bloodied blade to acknowledge the crowd's adoration. She had never tasted defeat, never known fear. Born and bred for combat, enhanced with biomechanical implants that granted her superhuman speed and strength, she was the pinnacle of Valkorian warrior evolution. The arena's mammoth screens displayed images of the newly discovered human homeworld, a blue-green marble called Earth. Cities sprawled across continents, primitive flying machines dotted the skies, and their largest conflicts involved mere thousands of combatants wielding laughably simple weapons. "Look at them," Nexthal sneered, zooming in on human soldiers in desert camouflage. "They don't even have proper exoskeletons. Their skin is exposed, vulnerable. They'll break like twigs." The crowd's laughter echoed through the arena as footage showed human conflicts, soldiers diving for cover behind rocks and debris, their faces painted with mud and fear. To the Valkorians, who had faced plasma cannons and quantum disruptors for millennia, it looked like children playing at war. "Prepare the selection protocols," Emperor Vaktholon commanded. "Choose their finest warriors. We'll give these humans the honor of facing our champions in the grand arena. The galaxy will witness how quickly inferior species crumble before true military prowess." As the transport vessels prepared for Earth, Kythera sharpened her weapons and meditated on the coming slaughter. She had faced the galaxy's fiercest warriors, the crystalline shard dancers of Proxima, the hive-minded battle drones of Kepler 442, the energy-based wraiths of the void. All had fallen before Valkorian might. These humans would be no different. The Liberation Fleet descended through Earth's atmosphere like falling stars, their plasma drives painting aurora across the morning sky. Captain Vexandra observed the primitive human settlements through her ship's quantum sensors, noting the laughably sparse defensive positions and obsolete radar installations that feebly swept the heavens. "Target their military command centers first," she instructed her tactical officer. "Standard suppression protocol. Disable their communication networks, neutralize their leadership, then begin specimen collection." The first human military base they encountered was a sprawling complex in what the locals called Nevada. The humans scrambled like insects when the Valkorian ships appeared, their primitive aircraft launching in desperate defense. Vexandra watched with amusement as their projectile weapons sparked harmlessly against her ship's energy shields. Pathetic, she murmured, then gave the order to disable their defenses with a single focused energy pulse. The electromagnetic weapon should have crippled every electronic system within a 50-kilometer radius. Instead, the human base continued operating. Warning lights flashed as the defenders adapted with startling speed, switching to manual targeting systems and analog communications. "Captain," her sensor officer reported with confusion, "they're not using standard quantum-based technology. Their systems are crude, but isolated. The EMP had minimal effect." Before Vexandra could respond, the human struck back, not with energy weapons or plasma cannons, but with something the Valkorians hadn't encountered in centuries: kinetic projectiles fired from electromagnetic railguns. The massive tungsten rods, accelerated to incredible velocities, punched through the lead ship's shields like they were tissue paper. The Valkorian vessel, designed to withstand energy weapons and particle beams, crumpled under the sheer physical impact. Its shields, calibrated for dispersing energy, were utterly unprepared for solid matter traveling at relativistic speeds. "Impossible!" Vexandra snarled as her fleet scattered. "These primitives can't possibly—" Her words were cut short as a human fighter pilot, flying a craft that looked cobbled together from scrap metal, performed an impossible maneuver, diving through her escort formation while launching dozens of small, dumb-fired missiles. The Valkorian point defense systems, designed to intercept sophisticated guided weapons, failed to adequately track the erratically flying projectiles. 3 more ships took critical damage before the humans vanished into the planet's magnetic field, using Earth's own electromagnetic properties to mask their signatures from Valkorian sensors. "Sir," the communications officer reported, "we're receiving a transmission from the planet's surface." A gruff human face appeared on the main screen, weathered, scarred, with piercing blue eyes that held no fear. "This is General Mackenzie Forrester of Earth Defense Command. You've got exactly 1 minute to withdraw from our airspace before we show you what 8,000 years of warfare evolution looks like." Vexandra's mandibles clicked with contempt. "You dare threaten the Valkorian Empire? We have conquered civilizations across the galaxy." "Congratulations," Forrester replied dryly. "We've been conquering each other since we figured out how to sharpen sticks. You want a war? You picked the wrong species." The human general leaned forward, and Vexandra felt something she hadn't experienced in decades: uncertainty. "See, the thing about humans is we don't fight fair. We don't fight with honor. We fight to win, and we've gotten very, very good at it. You thought you were dealing with primitives because our technology looks simple. But there's a difference between simple and primitive, and you're about to learn it the hard way." The transmission cut out, leaving the Valkorian fleet in ominous silence. Within hours, every major government on Earth had been contacted. Within days, production facilities were retooling. Within weeks, humanity's greatest minds were reverse engineering captured Valkorian technology and combining it with human ingenuity. The Valkorians had expected to face stone-throwing savages. Instead, they had awakened something far more dangerous, a species that had spent millennia perfecting the art of killing other humans, and was now focused entirely on new targets. The war was about to begin in earnest. Admiral Korthak's mandibles ground together as he studied the tactical displays aboard his flagship. 3 months into the human conflict, and the supposedly primitive species had already cost the Valkorian Empire more ships than they'd lost in the previous century. "Explain to me again how an entire planetary assault fleet was destroyed by farmers," he hissed at the trembling intelligence officer. "Sir, they weren't exactly farmers," Officer Yildena replied, her tentacles quivering. According to our captured reconnaissance data, the humans have a concept called total war. Every civilian is a potential combatant. Every settlement is a fortress. The holographic display showed the aftermath of the Kepler 438b colony assault. What should have been a simple occupation had turned into a nightmare. The human colonists, supposedly peaceful terraforming specialists, had rigged their entire settlement with improvised explosive devices. When the Valkorian ground forces landed, they found themselves fighting not just soldiers, but shopkeepers with hunting rifles, children with homemade grenades, and elderly humans who detonated themselves rather than surrender. They don't follow the accords of honorable warfare, Korthak muttered. No uniforms, no designated combatants, no rules of engagement. It gets worse, sir, Yildena continued. They've started broadcasting something they call insurgency manuals across all occupied territories. Every species we've subjugated for the past millennium is suddenly remembering how to resist. The Helix Collective has begun using human tactics, improvised, explosives, guerrilla warfare, psychological operations. On the main screen, footage played from the mining world of Zarian 7. The docile insectoid workers, who had labored peacefully under Valkorian rule for 3 centuries, had simultaneously destroyed every processing facility in coordinated strikes. They'd learned from human broadcasts how to create shaped charges from mining equipment, how to organize cells of resistance, how to turn their oppressors' strength against them. The humans are teaching them to think like predators, Korthak realized with growing horror. Meanwhile, in the Sol system, humanity was adapting with terrifying speed. Earth's military-industrial complex, honed by centuries of global conflict, had begun producing weapons specifically designed to counter Valkorian advantages. If Valkorian shields deflected energy, humans used kinetic kill vehicles. If Valkorian armor could withstand plasma, humans deployed hypervelocity tungsten penetrators. If Valkorian tactics relied on technological superiority, humans fought with cunning, deception, and sheer bloody-minded persistence. Captain Raina Volkov reviewed the latest engagement reports from her command bunker deep beneath the Siberian permafrost. Her forces had just completed their 3rd successful ambush of a Valkorian patrol using nothing more sophisticated than concealed pit traps and crossbows, weapons so primitive that Valkorian sensors didn't even recognize them as threats. They're learning, she told her staff officers. Each engagement they adapt a little more, but they're adapting to fight the war they expect, not the war we're giving them. Her communications officer looked up from his console. Ma'am, we're receiving reports from the European theater. The resistance cells in former Germany have successfully converted a captured Valkorian transport into a kinetic bombardment platform. They're calling it Project Vergeltung. Volkov smiled grimly. Vergeltung, retaliation. The humans weren't just defending anymore, they were taking the fight to the enemy. Captured Valkorian technology was being reverse-engineered, weaponized, and turned against its creators with human ruthlessness. Sir, another officer reported, intelligence indicates the Valkorians are requesting reinforcements from their home territories. They're also apparently canceling their Grand Centennial Games. Why? Because half their member species are in open revolt, sir. The humans have been broadcasting instruction manuals for resistance warfare in over 300 alien languages. Every world the Valkorians have conquered is suddenly remembering what freedom tastes like. Across the galaxy, the Valkorian Empire, built on the principle of technological and military superiority, was discovering what happened when faced with an opponent that refused to fight by their rules. The humans didn't seek honorable combat. They sought victory. They didn't want fair fights. They wanted their enemies dead by any means necessary. And they were teaching everyone else the same lessons. Emperor Vakthulan's ancient claws scraped against the obsidian throne as casualty. Reports flooded in from across the empire. The human conflict had spread like a virus, infecting every corner of Valkorian space with rebellion and chaos. 27 core worlds have declared independence, Advisor Muldranath reported, his gaseous form flickering with distress. The humans have established what they call freedom radio, broadcasting resistance techniques and coordination protocols to every enslaved species in our territory. And our response? The Emperor's voice was barely controlled fury. The Third Fleet attempted to silence the broadcast station on Europa. The humans, they had prepared for this. When our ships entered the system, they detonated 17 nuclear devices hidden in the asteroid belt. The debris field destroyed 8 of our vessels, and the electromagnetic pulse disabled 12 more. Vakhthalan's scales darkened to near black. Nuclear weapons, crude, barbaric, and utterly devastating. The humans wielded them like clubs, with no regard for the elegant principles of civilized warfare. The survivors reported something else, Majesty, Muldranath continued hesitantly. The humans weren't trying to protect Europa. They were using it as bait. While our fleet was dealing with the nuclear trap, human strike teams infiltrated our research stations on Titan and Io. They stole our quantum communication arrays and dimensional fold generators. Impossible. Those facilities were heavily guarded. Sir, the humans sent soldiers who had been clinically dead for several minutes before being revived with their medical technology. They walked through our energy scanners because they registered as corpses. Once inside, they eliminated our guards and took everything. The tactical display showed the scope of human adaptation. In 18 months, they had gone from throwing stones to fielding fleets equipped with hybrid human Valkorian technology. Worse, they weren't just copying Valkorian designs. They were improving them, making them more efficient, more deadly, more practical. On the bridge of the human dreadnought Unbroken, Admiral Chen Wei-Lin studied the intelligence reports from deep-cover operatives throughout Valkorian space. The humans had done something the Valkorians never expected. They had learned to think like their enemy while retaining their own tactical advantages. Status report on Operation Pandora, she requested. Proceeding ahead of schedule, Admiral, her intelligence chief replied. We've successfully infiltrated 37 Valkorian military academies. The human exchange students are teaching their combat techniques to allied species while simultaneously learning Valkorian tactical doctrine. And our former prisoners? All assets in place. The Valkorians never realized that every human they captured and released was actually a trained operative. We now have intelligence networks on every major Valkorian world. The plan was audacious in its simplicity. Humans had allowed themselves to be captured, studied, and occasionally released during prisoner exchanges. The Valkorians, confident in their superiority, had never suspected that every human captive was gathering intelligence, making contacts, and preparing for the day when the real war would begin. That day was rapidly approaching. Commander Kithara, once the pride of the Valkorian military, sat in her cell aboard a human prison ship, studying her captors with growing respect and fear. They had defeated her not through superior strength or technology, but through superior tactics. The human who had bested her, a scarred veteran named Martinez, had fought with a cunning that bordered on prescience, anticipating every move, exploiting every weakness. "You want to know the difference between us?" Martinez had said after her capture. "You fight for glory. We fight for survival. You've had 8,000 years of easy victories. We've had 8,000 years of trying to kill each other. Every human conflict taught us something new about warfare. Every peace, treaty was just time to prepare for the next war." Now, observing her captors, Kithara began to understand. The humans didn't just wage war. They studied it, dissected it, learned from every defeat and victory. They treated warfare as both science and art, combining technological innovation with psychological manipulation, strategic planning with tactical improvisation. They were born predators, and they had turned that predatory instinct into the ultimate military doctrine: victory at any cost, by any means necessary. The Valkorian Empire, built on tradition and honor, was discovering what happened when honorable warriors faced an enemy that viewed honor as a liability and tradition as a weakness to exploit. The final assault on Valkorion. Prime began not with massive fleet engagements or orbital bombardments, but with something far more insidious: economic collapse. Human analysts had spent 2 years studying Valkorian supply chains, identifying critical bottlenecks, and then systematically destroying them. Emperor Vakhthalon stood in his throne room, watching the tactical displays as his empire crumbled from within. Every trade route was compromised, every supply depot sabotaged, every communication relay hijacked by human operatives and their growing network of former slaves turned allies. "Majesty," Commander Nexthul reported, his scales pale. "With defeat, the Outer Rim territories have completely cut off tribute payments. The humans have established what they call the Liberation Authority, a coordinated government representing over 400 formerly subjugated species. And our military response? Ineffective, sir. Every time we mass forces for a major offensive, the humans strike somewhere else. They've divided our attention across 300 fronts simultaneously. We're fighting shadows." The throne room doors burst open as Advisor Muldranith rushed in, his gaseous form crackling with panic. "Majesty, human forces have broken through the Proxima defense grid. They're en route to the capital system." Vakhthalon's laugh was bitter. "Let them come. We'll make our final stand here, in the heart of our empire. Rally every remaining ship. Call in every favor. Activate every defense. We'll show these mammals what true Valkorian might can accomplish." But even as he spoke, reports flooded in of Valkorian commanders surrendering without a fight, of entire fleets defecting to the human-led alliance, of planetary governments declaring independence. The empire that had ruled for 8 millennia was dissolving in a matter of months. Admiral Chen Wei-Lin observed the approaching Valkorian homeworld from the bridge of humanity's fury, a massive dreadnought constructed from reverse-engineered alien technology and human innovation. Around her, the Liberation Fleet stretched across space, not just human vessels, but ships from dozens of species, all united under the simple principle that freedom was worth any price. "Admiral," her tactical officer reported, "we're receiving surrender requests from 16 more Valkorian colonies. They're offering to provide intelligence on the capital's defenses in exchange for clemency." "Grant it," Chen replied. "We're not here for revenge. We're here to end this." The battle for Valkorion Prime was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. The Valkorians fought with desperate courage, throwing everything they had at the approaching Liberation Fleet. But courage alone wasn't enough against opponents who had spent their entire species' history learning how to overcome superior numbers and better technology. Human fighters, piloted by veterans who had cut their teeth fighting each other, danced through Valkorian formations with lethal precision. The alien pilots, trained for honorable single combat, couldn't adapt to the humans' pack tactics, coordinated swarm attacks that overwhelmed individual targets through sheer numbers and ruthless efficiency. "They're not fighting us," Kythera observed from her position aboard the human flagship, where she now served as a tactical advisor. "They're fighting the war they wanted, not the war we gave them." General Forrester, now serving as overall military commander for the Liberation Authority, nodded grimly. "That's always been their weakness. They conquered the galaxy by being better at the same kind of warfare everyone else was fighting. But humans, we've never fought fair. We've never fought honorably. We've only fought to win." The final phase of the battle was almost anticlimactic. As human forces penetrated the planet's defenses, Valkorian resistance crumbled, not through overwhelming firepower, but through simple exhaustion. They had been fighting a war of attrition for 3 years, and the humans had simply outlasted them. Emperor Vakhthalon, his palace surrounded and his guards surrendered, faced his captors with what dignity remained. General Forrester, scarred and weathered by years of constant warfare, stood before the fallen emperor with neither hatred nor triumph in his eyes, only weary professionalism. "Your empire is ended," Forrester said simply. "Your people will be offered the same choice as everyone else, freedom and self-determination or continued conflict. I recommend you choose wisely." "You've destroyed 8,000 years of civilization," Vakthulon replied bitterly. "No," Forrester corrected. "We've ended 8,000 years of oppression. There's a difference." 6 months after the fall of Valkorion Prime, the galaxy was undergoing the most dramatic transformation in recorded history. The Liberation Authority, headquartered on a neutral space station constructed at the galactic rim, faced the monumental task of rebuilding civilization from the ashes of empire. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood before the Galactic Assembly, representatives from over 800 species gathered in the largest diplomatic conference in galactic history. The former enemy, Advisor Muldraneth, now served as the Valkorian representative, his species having chosen integration over continued resistance. "The question before us," Vasquez addressed the assembly, "is not whether the old empire can be restored. It cannot. The question is what we build in its place." The debate that followed revealed the true scope of humanity's impact on galactic civilization. Species that had been conquered and subjugated for millennia were discovering concepts they had forgotten: self-governance, economic independence, cultural autonomy. But they were also struggling with the responsibilities that came with freedom. "The humans have given us a weapon," declared Ambassador Zilthera of the former Helix Collective, her insectoid features animated with passion. "They've taught us that oppression is not inevitable, that the strong need not always rule the weak, but wielding this weapon requires wisdom we may not possess." The challenges were immense. Hundreds of species needed to learn how to govern themselves after centuries of imperial rule. Trade networks had to be rebuilt, territorial disputes resolved, and military forces reorganized from instruments of oppression into tools of defense. On Earth, now serving as the unofficial capital of human space, President Maria Santos reviewed the daily reports with a mixture of pride and concern. Humanity had won the war, but winning the peace was proving far more complex. "The Andromedans are requesting military advisors," her Secretary of Defense reported. "They're facing internal conflicts as their former nobility attempts to reassert control over the working castes." "And the Centauri Republic?" "Successfully transitioned to democratic governance, but they're struggling with economic inequality. Apparently, 8 centuries of empire created significant wealth disparities that are causing social unrest." Santos nodded thoughtfully. The humans had expected military challenges, but they hadn't fully anticipated the social and economic complexities of liberating an entire galaxy. Species that had lived under authoritarian rule for generations needed time and guidance to develop the institutions necessary for self-governance. "What about our former enemies?" Mixed results. About 60% of former Valkorian military personnel have accepted integration into the new defense forces. The remainder have either retired or formed what they call honor societies, essentially support groups for coping with their cultural transformation. The integration process had been surprisingly successful. Many Valkorians, once they understood that humans weren't seeking revenge or dominance, had embraced the new order with enthusiasm. Commander Cathera had become one of the most effective advocates for reform, using her insider knowledge to help design new military doctrines that emphasized defense over conquest. "Sir," her aide interrupted, "we're receiving reports of concerning developments in the outer spiral. Several former imperial species are forming something called the Restoration Alliance. They claim they're going to rebuild the empire under proper leadership." Santos sighed. Of course, it wouldn't be that simple. Liberating oppressed peoples was one thing. Dealing with those who preferred oppression to the uncertainties of freedom was another challenge entirely. In the Valkorian residential districts of New Geneva, former Emperor Vakthulon tended a small garden outside his modest apartment. The War Crimes Tribunal had sentenced him to exile rather than execution, a mercy that had surprised many observers. He spent his days writing memoirs that no one would publish and contemplating the magnitude of his failures. "You know," said a voice behind him, "most humans expected you to be more bitter about losing everything." Vakthulon turned to see General Forrester, now serving as Director of Galactic Security, standing at the garden gate. "What would be the point?" The former Emperor replied, "My empire was built on the assumption that might makes right. You proved that intelligence makes might. I was simply outmatched." "Your people are adapting well," Forrester observed. "Better than we expected." "Because we finally understand what we were fighting," Vakthulon said, carefully pruning a flowering vine. "We thought we were facing primitives who would break under pressure. Instead, we encountered a species that had spent their entire evolutionary history learning how to break other things under pressure. The outcome was inevitable once we made that first mistake. The galaxy was slowly learning the same lesson the Valkorians had learned too late. Humanity's true strength wasn't their technology or their numbers, but their absolute refusal to accept defeat and their endless capacity for adaptation. 25. Years after the Liberation War, as historians had begun calling it, the galaxy bore little resemblance to the rigid imperial structure that had dominated it for millennia. Admiral Martinez, now in his 70s and serving as director of the Galactic Defense Institute, stood before a mixed class of cadets representing 43 different species. "Can anyone tell me the primary lesson of the Valkorian conflict?" he asked the assembled students. A young Helix officer raised her chitinous arm. "That technological superiority means nothing without tactical flexibility, sir." "Partially correct. Anyone else?" A Valkorian cadet, one of the new generation raised in the post-imperial era, spoke up. "That underestimating your opponent is the fastest path to defeat, sir." "Better. But you're still thinking like military strategists. Think like historians. What changed?" The class fell silent until a human cadet from Mars Colony ventured, "That war isn't just about fighting, sir. It's about understanding why you're fighting and being willing to do whatever it takes to win." Martinez nodded approvingly. "Precisely. The Valkorian Empire fell not because humans were better warriors, but because humans were willing to make war a totality rather than a ritual. They fought for honor. We fought for survival. They fought with rules. We fought with results." The lecture hall's holographic displays showed comparative footage from the war, Valkorian forces advancing in perfect formation, their weapons gleaming, their movements choreographed like a deadly dance. Then human forces, ragged, improvised, using captured equipment and jury-rigged weapons, but advancing nonetheless. "The Valkorians spent 8,000 years perfecting the art of honorable warfare," Martinez continued. "Humans spent 8,000 years perfecting the art of winning wars. When these philosophies collided, there was only one possible outcome." After class, Martinez walked through the Institute's Memorial Hall, where monuments honored both the human dead and the countless beings who had died under imperial rule. The wall of names stretched for nearly a kilometer, representing species extinct, cultures destroyed, and freedoms suppressed across 8 millennia of Valkorian dominance. At the hall's center stood a simple plaque with words in over 300 languages. They thought they knew battle, till outsiders showed them real pain. Never again. On Valkorian Prime, now renamed Liberty Prime, former Commander Kithara served as Chancellor of the Reconciliation Council. Her office overlooked the Memorial Plaza, where statues of liberation heroes stood alongside monuments to imperial victims. The city had been rebuilt with input from dozens of species, creating an architectural fusion that would have been impossible under the old regime. "Chancellor," her aide announced, The annual Liberation Day ceremonies are ready to begin. Kythera nodded, adjusting the ceremonial sash that bore the symbols of all member species in the Galactic Federation. As she walked to the podium, she reflected on the irony of her position. A former champion of the Empire now leading the efforts to ensure its atrocities were never repeated. The crowd that gathered in Liberation Plaza represented the new galactic order. Humans standing beside former enemies, children of oppressed species playing with the descendants of their oppressors, all united under the simple principle that freedom was worth any sacrifice. 25 years ago, Kythera began, her voice carrying across the plaza, we thought we understood warfare. We believed that strength came from superior technology and rigid hierarchy. We were wrong. She gestured to the mixed crowd before her. The humans taught us that true strength comes from adaptability, from the willingness to learn from every defeat, and from the understanding that the purpose of war is not glory, but the protection of those who cannot protect themselves. In the Earth's orbital cities, President Santos, now in her second term as Federation President, watched the ceremony via quantum link while reviewing reports from across the galaxy. The challenges were far from over. 3 separatist movements were active in the outer territories, economic inequality remained a problem on 17 worlds, and border disputes continued to flare between former imperial provinces. But the reports also showed unprecedented achievements, medical advances shared freely among all species, scientific discoveries that would have been impossible under the old system's rigid castes, and cultural exchanges that were creating entirely new art forms and philosophies. Madam President, her chief of staff reported, the deep space monitoring stations are detecting what appears to be a probe from outside the galaxy. It's broadcasting mathematical sequences, potentially a first contact scenario. Santos smiled grimly. Another unknown quantity entering their carefully balanced peace. But that was the price of freedom, constant vigilance, continuous adaptation, endless preparedness for whatever challenges the universe might present. Alert the Defense Council, she ordered, and prepare a standard first contact package. If they're peaceful, we'll welcome them. If they're hostile, she left the sentence, unfinished, but the implication was clear. The galaxy had learned the lessons humans had spent millennia perfecting. Be prepared for war, but hope for peace. Fight only when necessary, but when you fight, fight to win. The legacy of the Liberation War wasn't just the fall of an empire. It was the birth of a new understanding of power, responsibility, and the true cost of freedom. The galaxy had learned what real pain looked like, and in learning that lesson, had discovered what real strength could accomplish. The stars themselves seemed to shine brighter in the new age of liberty.